and welcome back to the Unsolicited Film Reviews podcast. It's award season, folks. Oscars are nigh on now, and tonight we're going to be doing our power rankings of the Best Picture nominees from 10 to 1, going from our least favorite to our most favorite. Now, we haven't revealed our list to one another yet, so we're going to be
Nope.
doing this live. So, I'm Zach Miller, and joining me as always is Martin Cooke, and the nominees are interesting this year.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I've said this before. I think it's generally a fairly weak year for movies. So we'll see a lot of these that are in the top 10. I don't think would have been anywhere close to being nominated in other years and stronger years. But this is what we got. So we'll work with it and we'll try to come up with our lists.
Yeah, I will say that last year I felt really confident and really strongly about my picks and where they each lie in the list. This year, not so much. I do agree that it was a very weak field overall, especially in comparison to last year. And but the latter movies that I saw elevated this considerably. So
Yeah, there's definitely some good movies, but I think even the ones at the top of my list, I think are flawed films.
yeah.
So there isn't anything that just really stood out to me as kind of a wow film, like a few of them did last year. And that just simply wasn't my experience in the cinema this year. But there's always hope for more around the corner.
Yep, so the Oscars are going to be Sunday, March 2nd on ABC and Hulu, at least in the States. How can our Canadian friends watch the Oscars?
That's a very good question. I actually haven't looked at that. It's probably either CTV or Global. Usually we'll pick up the ABC feed. And then, I'm sure whoever's doing that, if it's CTV or Global, they'll do their own pre-show and after show as well.
All right, so you ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so my least favorite of the top 10 this year is actually, as kind of a surprise to me, was Nickel Boys.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. So right off the bat, we're going to have some disagreement. I mean, not major disagreement, but some disagreement. Go ahead.
That always makes for better podcasting anyway.
Yes.
So yeah, Nickel Boys was just so jarring the way that they filmed it. Oh, there will be considerable spoilers here, so if you haven't seen any of these films, I'd recommend you either if you don't care about spoilers, then fine. But we're not going to go plot point by plot point, but we
No.
are going to be talking in relatively deep depth about these films. So yeah, okay, Nickel Boys is shot entirely from the character's POV. The POV switches between characters, but you're always looking at other characters as if you're in that person's skin. And while I thought it was an interesting device and a unique device, it really takes you out of the film, ironically enough, because you would think if you're in that character's POV that you would kind of, feel more empathy with the character. But I found as the movie went on, it was the reverse effect. I actually lacked empathy with the character because I couldn't see the actor acting. And watching actors act is kind of why we go to movies. So,
It's a
and
pretty important part of movie making. Yeah.
and the worst thing is that it ruined a very compelling story. And by the end of it, I was bored to tears. I was the only person in the theater at that particular showing, and I was checking the time on my phone about 45 minutes in, which wasn't even the halfway point, and that's a bad sign.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess I'll give my thoughts on this now. We'll talk about because some I'll have before you and some you'll have before me. Might as well discuss them now, and then we'll see where I have this ranked a little bit later. But I had the exact same thoughts actually. Like it's a very interesting story and a very important story. Like for me as a Canadian, it was very reminiscent of a lot of the horrible history and facts and stories that have been coming out about Canadian residential schools for Indigenous people.
Mm.
And these are absolutely stories that need to be told. That said, this was a movie, and so we're going to judge it as a movie. And yeah, the filmmaking choices that they made that you pointed out were just baffling to me. I had the exact same thought that it completely took me out of the movie. It was just so fucking distracting. I thought the first few minutes, I'm like, okay, this is whatever. I'll get used to it. I did not get used to it. As you said, it just grated on me throughout the entire thing. Look, I haven't read the book that it's based on, And there is, without giving too much of a spoiler away, there is a story reason why they chose to do it in this way, but there are a million other ways they could have done it. And choosing this path just felt like a gimmick to me. And so, yeah, I agree. It's not very high on my list, or going from top to bottom, it's not very high on my list either. I had it a little higher just because there were two other movies that I thought were more ridiculous. But yeah, the filmmaking totally took me out of the story as well.
And it honestly wasn't even that original because I don't know if you remember, but 10 years ago, this movie called Hardcore Henry came out. Uh,
Right.
very different subject matter,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was basically mimicking the experience of a first person shooter without actually playing the game, which was also boring as hell.
Yeah.
So it was another stupid movie, but yeah, there's just we need to leave that device out of filmmaking, I believe.
Yeah, and it also, as you kind of alluded to, it also wasn't consistent. Like it wasn't first person as the person telling the story. Sometimes it jumped between characters, and then sometimes when we jumped forward in time, they changed the camera location, and we were sort of seeing like the back of the person's shoulders and their head. It was just all very distracting and very weird.
And then they would repeat scenes. We would see a
Yeah.
scene from one character's perspective, and then the exact same scene plays over from a different character's perspective. And somebody could be like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's artsy," but it wasn't. We're just watching the same scene over, and that's called coverage, and that's what you're supposed to do in editing.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen that kind of thing in different movies before, but usually it's done when you're actually seeing it not just from a camera perspective, but from an actual like storytelling perspective. Like the person sees a situation in a totally different way, and that's not what we were getting at all when we saw scenes for a second and third time in this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just watching the exact same thing. There's no nuance. There's no like, oh, that we didn't miss this character over in the back that was like poking out from behind a tree or something. Like, yeah, no, it just did not work at all for me.
Yeah. All right, so my 10th movie will probably come as no surprise to anybody who's listened to the podcast over the last little while. And for me, that was Emilia Perez. I just did not think this was a very good movie. Like, the story was okay, but it was very surface level. It was too scattered over a bunch of different themes, but they never seemed to have any interest in exploring any of those themes in any depth. The music was either bad or uninteresting or boring to me. And also like as a trans representation movie, it was laughably cartoonish. Like I think it's notable that GLAAD, probably the biggest LGBTQ advocacy group, they came out with a statement saying that it was a poor representation of trans people. So like, who was this movie for? Why was it made? I just think it was not a good movie. And it's, for me, I'm stunned that this is a Best Picture nominee.
Yeah, you've had a chance to shit on this movie a little bit in our previous podcast, but this is the first time that we've recorded where I've had a chance to talk about it. And my God, the only reason that this is number nine instead of 10 is because I found it extremely entertaining, but not in the way that it was meant to be. Like this is worthy of Mystery Science Theater 3000 if anybody's old enough to remember that. Like it is just wildly just what the fuck am I watching here?
Yeah,
And like I knew it was going to be bad going in, and the fact that this had 13 Oscar nominations is mind-blowing to me. I think it just goes to show how Hollywood just loves to pander to whatever cause du jour is.
pandering to it. It's like I don't get
Pandering and misfiring,
it.
and
Okay,
they,
okay,
they
great.
they've always been able to do that in some respects, but
I suppose.
it but it's usually not recognized as the movie of the year. And I
Yeah,
think I think this is just like the breaking point for that particular mindset. And 13 nominations.
yeah. It's stunning, and I have to say, like, you're right about just kind of laughing about it. This was probably 5 minutes into this movie. I watched it alone here at home because it's just a Netflix movie. But if there had been other people sitting next to me, or if I had had a camera crew, I definitely would have been doing the like Jim Halpert look in the camera, like look like what the fuck is this kind of thing? Because yeah, I just it was so bizarre to me.
And just for context, other movies in the past that have had 13 nominations include Forrest Gump, Gone with the Wind, Oppenheimer, Lord of the Rings, and Titanic and La La Land. All were the movie of that particular year.
Mm.
With the exception of maybe Forrest Gump because 1994 was just such a strong year.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
these are all held up as cinema classics. And I think it's just so laughable that these songs, they weren't even songs.
They
Like
weren't. They weren't. It was bad music.
they were just kind of talking over bad music.
Yeah, it was like they were trying to do um like Hamilton style rapping, but they just didn't know how to do it and set it over like Latin or something. The music didn't make any sense to me.
Oh, one thing I did want to ask you in particular,
Yes,
since you are fluent in Spanish,
yes,
did you watch this with the dub version or the not dub version? Did you watch it in Spanish?
yeah. Oh, I didn't realize it. I don't like watching any kind of movie, even movies in languages that I don't know with a dub. Like
I mean,
it did have the subtitles, but I definitely didn't watch the dubbed version.
so just to hit this point home, there was nothing lost in translation, right?
No, sadly, no, sadly, the Spanish was that, yeah, that absurd as well, actually.
I was disappointed because I'm the same way. If it's a language I don't understand, I always like the subtitles rather than the dub. But there wasn't an option on Netflix to do that for whatever reason. So,
Oh, hmm.
but I think so. This there's a wave of controversy behind this movie now, courtesy of the star Carla Sofia Gascon,
Yeah,
and I think we may, in retrospect, owe a lot to her past comments because she's torpedoing her own movie faster than Kendrick Lamar is torpedoing Drake's career.
yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, maybe that is going to cause the movie not to win as much. And yeah, in that case, well, thanks for previously racist tweets. Uh, yeah,
Never thought you'd hear
no,
that.
very bizarre.
Yeah. Even, Selena Gomez and Zoe Saldana, very talented actresses in their own right. Just nothing. No, it didn't make me feel anything, even when even when Zoe Saldana had her like very, I guess, well acted but emotionally vacant
Yeah,
scenes, like where she would just break down and cry. I'm like, wait, did I miss something? Why is she crying? What's going on?
yeah.
And this is my number nine film, by the way, so I might as well just knock all this stuff out.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
So, and this, like, again, the songs, like, especially I think the most circulated clip is the one in
penis to
the
vagina bit.
penis to vagina, and that's supposed to be singing like
Yeah,
vaginoplasty, yes, breast enhancement, yes, yes.
I think that's the name of the song is vaginoplasty or something like that. Like, come on, what are we doing here?
And again, the main character Emilia Perez is just so hateable.
Well,
Like,
see, and I don't even think she's the main character, right? Like, I think
no,
Zoe Saldana's character is actually kind of the main character, but the movie itself maybe was a little confused about that as well. Like, she was the one who, the movie starts with her. It's kind of about her being pulled into this situation in this world. The movie ends with her, but yeah, the promotion around the whole movie and the fact that they put Carla Sofia Gascon up for Best Actress and Zoe Saldana up for Best Supporting Actress. Do they even know who the main character is? Like, I don't understand almost anything about this film.
and Emilia Perez, the character, wasn't hateable in like a good way, like, oh, this is a great, like,
Yeah,
complicated anti-hero.
no,
No, the movie tried to make us empathize with this character, but it's a vile human being.
yeah,
I mean, the way it's child abuse, spousal abuse, and not like physical, but like the way she gaslit her entire family and tried to manipulate them,
That
and
they were a murderous drug lord. Yeah.
yeah, that's beside the
Yeah.
point.
That's
But
trying to
like,
like, I don't know, trans wash their background. Is that a thing? Like, I don't
it
know.
is now. It is now. Yeah, so I don't know what else there is to say really about it. It's just
No.
I guess it's worth a watch if you're a completist and or if you want to like, smoke a bowl and just watch some really wild out there movie. But
Yeah.
like I said, it's more laugh out loud funny than it is like a real hardcore dramatic piece.
Yeah, it'd probably be actually fairly funny to watch that really high.
Yes,
Uh,
it was.
that's why you have it at 9 rather than 10.
Yeah.
I was stone cold sober when I watched that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't watch Nickel Boys High either. So, yeah.
All right, so if that's your number 9, then my number 9 is The Substance.
Oh, okay.
Like I just thought this movie was largely ridiculous. I was never quite sure if it was taking itself seriously or not, but the fact that it put on such a massive Oscar push, I guess it was. Um, it was possibly one of the most unsubtle movies I've ever seen. Like, and here's an example. Early on, there's a scene where she gets flowers from her boss or whatever, and the card on the flower says something like "You were a big star" or something like that. And then the shot cuts away and shows her doing something in her living room, and then cuts back, and it's like zoomed in, laser focused on the word "were." Like, just in case we missed it. Oh, it's saying you're over the hill and you're past your prime. Like, just beating the audience over the head. Like, it didn't give the audience any credit. That it was just so unsubtle. And I also thought the whole internal logic of it was very confused at times. Like, they're the same person, but it also seems pretty clear. Okay, now this is going to give away some spoilers to anybody who hasn't seen this, but it also seems pretty clear that they're not actually living and experiencing or remembering the life lived by their other half. So, what the fuck exactly do they get out of it then? Like, what is the whole point of this for the person who chooses to undergo this? I mean, there are much more readily accessible drugs and alcohol for somebody who just wants to knock themselves out for a little while. Like, I don't, that whole internal logic didn't kind of fell apart for me very quickly. And so yeah, I thought stylistically it was very interesting. Like, I loved the sort of the 80s style, the very bright, I loved all the stylistic stuff. The movie I just thought was, as I said, kind of largely ridiculous.
Okay, so I can see this is going to be this year's Poor Things.
Oh, okay.
We had
You really
wild
liked it, did you?
we have wildly different opinions on this one.
Okay.
So for those of you who listened last year, Martin was very down on Poor Things, and
Yes, I love
it was towards the top of my list. I think it was third or fourth or something like that. But yeah, I didn't overthink this too much. I just kind of let it wash over me. This style, the stylistic set design, and I thought it was very much a blend between Kubrick and Cronenberg, and
it.
it wasn't as good as Kubrick's movies, but I just mean the style. Like it was very obviously an homage to those two guys, and I came to find out. I formed this opinion while I was watching it. Then I came to find out that everybody else had the exact same opinion. So I wasn't. It wasn't like it was. It's not revelatory in any way, shape, or form. But I just, I did come to that conclusion on my own. I thought Demi Moore was fantastic, and I guess I should save the praise for it for when I get to that on the list.
Mm.
So I do see your point though about the flaws in the logic of the world, but I just thought the message was not subtle at all. I do agree.
Yeah, I actually think for me the big star was Margaret Qualley, and I've seen her in a few things lately um, that lead me to believe that she's got some real acting chops.
Hmm.
I mean, she's already. I mean, I'm talking about her like she's still up and coming. She's fully established at this point, but I think she's got an even brighter future ahead of her. I think she's got some really interesting stuff that she can do. So, all right, you're number eight.
My number eight is Conclave.
Okay.
And I think I have it so low because my expectations were so high. I love intrigue in the Catholic Church. Like when I you were the first one to tell me about this actually because I believe you saw it at TIFF
Mhm.
when it first came out, like way before it even premiered.
Yeah.
So I was really looking forward to this. The cast, like I love Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and you know, I love just the whole conclave process of how archaic it is, but yeah, it's still relevant to so many people. And I went into this just expecting a great film, and I was just kind of let down by, first of all, the big twist at the end wasn't like anything shocking. It was just kind of like, okay, that's kind of out of nowhere. And I know this is adapted screenplay, so it's based on a novel, so you
Yeah.
can only take so many creative liberties. But it just kind of fell flat for me at the end. But I thought Ray Fiennes was fantastic, and I thought the score was really good, and both Ray Fiennes and the score are nominated, as well as obviously Conclave for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay. All I think are deserved, especially with this field, but it just didn't leave me feeling anything. And especially because the first like half hour to 45 minutes were really ramping up to something that just kind of fizzled out at the end.
Yeah, we have very similar thoughts on this. I have it ranked a little bit higher than you do, but I did see it back in September at the Toronto International Film Festival. And like you, like I was really excited going, this is entirely in my wheelhouse. A bunch of people sitting around in an ancient institution discussing theology and the changing world and making important decisions. Like, sign me up for any of that kind of movie. But yeah, I was kind of let down as well. The main problem for me, just kind of like you, like it wasn't just the twist at the end. There were a bunch of sort of twists and turns throughout this movie. And most of them, and these are the things upon which the plot develops, most of them didn't really work for me. They seemed very artificially constructed. They didn't come sort of naturally out of the characters and the story. And so a bunch of it just kind of came across as being a little silly. Um, but that's it. I mean, there were still lots of things I liked about it. As you said, the cast was amazing. I thought Ralph Fiennes was fantastic. And there were some genuinely funny moments in the film too, which in a dramatic film like that is always welcome. And I think the best thing about it was as a character study of Ray Fiennes' Cardinal Lawrence character. That was really interesting. Just his internal struggle. They just didn't make that the focus of the movie, unfortunately.
Yeah, a couple of tweaks here and there, and it could have been spectacular.
Yep,
Like you're right, if they would have focused on more on his real struggle with his faith and the modern Catholic Church, like that's what I was there for. And I
exactly. Yeah.
I don't mind being surprised in the cinema, but sometimes I just want like give me what I want.
Yeah, and look, this is another one where I'm not familiar with the source material. I haven't read the book, but maybe this is a case where they should have just diverged a little bit more from the book and just gone their own way to make the film.
All right, so what's your number seven? I mean number eight, sorry.
So my number eight was Nickel Boys,
Hmm.
and so we already talked about I explained my reasons why. Interesting story, fucking baffling filmmaking.
All
Number seven.
right. My number seven is Dune Part Two.
Oh wow. Okay, interesting. Yeah, we are gonna have some disputes about this.
And my own list surprised me when I was compiling it. Granted, this came out in last January, right?
Yeah,
And so,
this came out earliest of the year out of any of the Best Picture nominees.
yeah, so I haven't seen it since, but I don't know. It just Denny Villeneuve is awesome, and Timothy Chalamet is having the year of his life with two of his movies being on this list with this and A Complete Unknown. I have never read Dune. I know you have, I
Yeah.
think multiple times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't like a fan coming into this universe. I really liked Dune 1, and this was like a visual marvel, but I think it was kind of like a Marvel movie on sand.
Hmm.
So I wasn't like swept away. And also this, I know there's a third part coming, and maybe this is kind of like a Lord of the Rings Two Towers situation because there was no finality in it, and it just seemed like it's setting up the next one. So that's why I had it so low because it didn't do anything. I mean, it did something for me, but it didn't like sweep me away.
I agree with that to some extent. It really is hard to separate this from the first movie and also knowing that there's another one that they're already filming that's coming up. And they did make some choices at the end of this movie to set up the third movie a little bit more directly because actually the first two movies were based on one book that were split in half, and then
Mm.
the third movie that's coming out is based on the second Dune book. So the in the original there was a bit more finality at the end of this first book. Sorry, in the book there was a bit more finality at the end of this story, but I think there were a couple of small choices that left you wanting more, and obviously that was deliberate. In part, probably for Villeneuve to make sure that he got the funding for a third movie,
Mm.
uh, which he did. So mission accomplished. Yeah, we disagree a bit like this. I thought this was well beyond a Marvel movie. Um, I'm not sure it went substantially beyond the first movie. There were there were a lot of segments that left me in awe, kind of like the first, that's on IMAX on in the biggest screen possible and stuff like that. And but I also thought there were a number of really touching emotional moments, especially the core story that they bore down on and the relationship between Paul and Chani. Now, this is the story, as I've probably talked about before, is famously almost unfilmable just because it is so complex and so filled with a million different themes. And so, as a filmmaker, he has to make choices.
Hmm.
And I didn't necessarily agree with all of them, but I still think he's doing as about a good as a job as possible in bringing the story to light and trying to focus and highlight on a few of those key themes. So for me, I thought this was much better. I'll talk about it a bit more because I've got it much higher up on my list than this.
And the fact that it was so visually stunning, like Paul Atreides riding the sandworm will go down in history as like one of the craziest, most ambitious, and well executed action sequences in cinema history, I think.
Yeah.
So I want to give credit where credit's due. But I think the fact that they did have those kinds of huge sequences and the climax was just a knife fight between these two guys at the end was a little disappointing. And also, I think Christopher Walken was laughably miscast as the Emperor.
That I will agree with. Yeah, I didn't like that casting. I agree.
Because as much as I love Christopher Walken, he's always just Christopher Walken.
Yeah,
And you have to pick and choose where you put him. And in this like crazy out there sci-fi slash like with medieval elements in it, and you just have him like, hey, I'm the emperor. It was just like
oh, ladies, what are you doing here? Yeah,
so
I can't do Christopher Walken. I'm terrible at impressions.
yeah, but yeah, that really bumped me, and
Sure.
I love the entire cast though.
Yeah,
Chalamet, Zendaya, Florence Pugh, a little Annie Taylor-Joy thrown in there, Rebecca Ferguson, uh, um, um,
Rebecca Ferguson for me is the highlight. I thought
Javier
her
Bardem.
and again, I'll get into some more stuff later, but her work in that movie was incredible. I thought she really expanded the character of Jessica, who in the first movie was really just kind of like protective mother, whatever. She expands her character into one that operates much more into moral gray areas, and I thought it was just fantastic work by her.
All right, yep, those are my thoughts on that though.
All right, so Yeah, so that was your number seven.
Seven.
Okay, so my number seven, which I have a feeling you're going to have a lot higher. My number seven was Wicked.
Mm.
Um, and look, I don't actually have that much to say about Wicked. It was fun, it was entertaining, but I didn't think it gave me any particular insight into anything. It was a perfectly fine movie. Um, Good, not great. You know, there were some odd sequences, some strange choices, but overall, just like a good, solid, entertaining ride. But I think that's kind of all it was. And in a lot of other years, it may have just been relegated to kind of costume and set design awards.
Mm.
But here we are. So that's my thought on Wicked. Like I didn't dislike it at all. I just didn't think there was anything particularly special about it that warrants it being much higher on a best picture of the year list.
Yeah, it's actually my number six. So again, I didn't have it way higher than you, but just slightly. So might as well just knock it out while we're here.
Mhm.
It was way better than I thought it was going to be, though, I must say.
Okay.
I saw it on opening day and never seen the Broadway musical, but I knew roughly what the plot was, and I was kind of blown away seeing it in Dolby with the sound and the set design and everything. Again, we've talked about this briefly, but Cynthia Erivo is like a once in a generation voice, and Ariana Grande is also great, but she just doesn't have like those powerful numbers that Erivo has. She's just kind of like the cutesy one that sings the kind of the more poppy ones, where Erivo's
Yeah.
really the emotional anchor. And God, she just brought it. We also spoke about the nauseating press tour that those two went on. They're just crying every time about emotional everything. I mean, it's Broadway though. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, it's true. That's true. It's very broad.
If you can't be melodramatic on
Yeah.
Broadway, then
Yeah.
that
I
kind of
think,
comes with the
to
territory.
be fair to them, I think that's probably authentic to who they are. I think there are two people that probably cry and get very emotional. I don't think that part was acting. But the whole press thing was kind of a put on.
Yeah, I saw it was a really fun time, and for being 2.5 hours, I thought it was very briskly paced, and the
Sure. Yeah,
it didn't drag at all, and it was just a really fun time at the movies. Was it like groundbreaking in any particular way? Probably not, but here we are. We have to deal with the 10 that they gave us.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was struggling between that and Dune, but I was more entertained by Wicked, so I just put that like gave it a slight edge.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Like it was a very fun time at the movies, and I'm, as you know, not even a huge musical fan, but I enjoyed it. I thought Ariana Grande, as I've mentioned before, was very funny. I think she's got great comedic chops. You're right on her singing. I think in part that was the character she was playing. Like
Sure.
she was really imitating that sort of like Princess Fairy voice kind of thing in terms of the song choice, the way she was singing those songs. But yeah, it was just a good time at the movies and not much more than that for me.
And again, like Dune, it was kind of just a setup for the next one. So,
That is true. Yeah.
what's your six?
All right. So my six then is Conclave. So we've already talked about it. So I have it a bit higher just because of all the things that I did love about it, mostly the cast and mostly Ray Fiennes. And again, I mean that mostly the acting and the cast. I also thought it was beautifully shot,
Mm.
and the fact that and the set design. I can't remember actually if it was nominated for that, but production design or not. But that was all soundstage. Like they created a Sistine Chapel, and all that stuff was soundstage. And I just think that's all very impressive.
It was for production design. It was
Okay.
nominated.
Yeah, because it definitely deserved to be nominated for that. So because of those things, that bumped it up a little bit, even if I was a bit disappointed. And like you, I'm not sure how much of my disappointment was because my expectations were so high going in.
It's tough. It's tough to overcome that.
It really is. Yeah.
And
Uh,
yeah, to your point, yeah, production design was amazing.
yeah,
Because the Vatican is notoriously cagey when it comes to filming in and around it. They almost never let people film inside of it, especially when it's kind of subversive.
yeah.
So, I mean, they got to protect their image or what's left of it.
All right.
On to number
Number five
five.
for you. Yes.
We are on the top half, counting
Yeah.
down. All right. So my number five was The Brutalist,
Okay.
right in the center there.
I have
And
it exactly in the same place. It is also my
okay,
number five.
wow. So yeah, wow. We're all like one or two off, except for a couple,
Yeah, a couple of
which
outliers.
is how we usually are. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
all good. Uh, what to say about The Brutalist?
Yeah.
It was brutally long,
I'm still
but
on it. Yeah. No.
but at least it had an intermission, which was very refreshing. And I think there should
Let's
be
all
more.
go to the lobby.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. I don't know if they did on your screening that they had a countdown clock,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
intermission. So it was like, oh, okay, I got this much time to go to the washroom and everything.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah,
And it really, because it is such a, let's just say it's kind of a slog. But breaking it up and having a chance to converse with the people, I went to see it with my mom. So being able to kind of like, okay, what do you think so far? And kind of, that's a cool experience that is lost because there's hasn't really been a major film with an intermission since what, the 70s, 60s.
it's been a while. Well,
So
actually, didn't Hateful Eight have an intermission?
the Roadshow version did, but that wasn't playing everywhere.
Oh, okay. I guess I saw that version then.
But it's funny because I was ready for this long kind of epic, and when I actually I actually laughed out loud when I saw Overture on the title card. I was like, oh God, here we go. Because
This is really a long epic. Yeah.
yeah, so I knew it was going to be crazy ambitious, and while emotionally it fell short, I thought the performances by both Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones and the cinematography were all phenomenal.
I agree. It was definitely the most ambitious movie of the year, and it just didn't quite hit all its goals. It didn't quite hit all its marks, in my opinion. But there were some very laudable things about this movie. It's in terms of in terms of the intermission, and as you said, you were able to talk with your mom about, oh, what do you think so far? The movie really changed after that intermission, though.
Oh, did
It was one
it?
kind of movie up to the intermission, and then a whole different kind of movie after that. So your discussions in that intermission and then after the movie would have been totally different.
And they were, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you're right about the acting. You're right about the cinematography. I thought the score got a well-deserved nomination. I thought it really amped up some of those scenes. It dealt with a bunch of really interesting themes. Um, I'm not sure that its exploration of those themes was always very coherent. Um, like the one that sort of was a common thread across everything, and which was probably the most coherent, is just the difficulties of the immigrant experience, especially first generation immigrants, and that was clear. But then some of the other things it was trying to deal with, I didn't think were very clear. The ending I didn't think really worked much at all, because the ending seemed to be somebody coming forward and telling us what the movie was about, and I didn't think that's what the movie had been about at all. Like basically, the person's talking mostly about uh, escaping the Holocaust and the trauma and everything with the experiences of the Holocaust. But I didn't think that was a theme that they spent that much time exploring throughout most of
Hmm.
the movie.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an odd choice that was what the speech at the very end of it focused on. And so some of those things I just quite didn't quite work for me. But overall, there were a number of things to really like about this movie and really admire about the movie. And I guess that's maybe where I come down. I think maybe I admire it more than I liked it.
Yeah, and in some respects, I think that's almost a metaphor for like brutalist architecture in general.
That's true. I'm actually not a fan at all of Brutalist
Me
architecture.
neither. Yeah,
I
I
know
like.
some people like it, but not me.
Yeah, I'm much more a fan of classical, and like I can only name like Frank Lloyd Wright as an architect, so I'm not like an architectural junkie or in chops maybe. But those are like 4,000 years apart. uh, yeah, yeah, brutalist architecture,
For rank, come on, get somebody in the middle there.
very well done, very harsh, but in the end emotionless. And I think a lot, like what I said, well acted. Oh, didn't even mention Guy Pearce yet. He was the best part of the entire thing.
I love Guy Pearce. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a bit hammy in parts, but I actually thought he like rode that line very well and didn't cross it.
I
I thought he was fantastic.
I completely agree. And I think that's kind of what a an American tycoon with a bottomless pit of money would kind of act like in that particular time period. So yeah.
Yeah, especially the son who kind of inherited a lot of that wealth, where a lot of that is performance, right? Because he wasn't actually the one who built himself up from the ground up.
And he
He's
has to
taking on this
compensate for that.
mantle of this of a tycoon in a way.
Yeah, then of course he has to overcompensate because he
Yeah,
knows
exactly.
he's so insecure.
Yeah,
But yeah, so all the acting performances were so great, but even the very like the stuff that was supposed to be very emotionally resonant just didn't hit with me. And I can't quite put my finger on why that is, but I don't know, it just didn't land in some way or another.
yeah, I agree. And then there were some, some of the times, like especially in the second half when it went off and it got into odd moments where it was 10 minutes of surrealist filmmaking for no
Mm.
apparent reason, and I didn't quite sure why they chose to do that in that weird sex scene, for instance. It didn't, yeah, a lot of it didn't quite tie together for me. As I said, very ambitious, and I absolutely appreciate the effort. I just wasn't quite sure he stuck to landing all the time.
Yeah. One thing we know though is Adrian Brody can play one hell of a Holocaust survivor
Absolutely, yeah,
because he did win the Oscar for I think it was 2004's The Pianist.
yeah. And now he's nominated again.
Yep.
All right, you're number four then, since we both agreed on number five.
So this is where the disconnect comes in because the substance is my number four.
Okay, okay. I'm glad you didn't have it higher.
So like we said, yeah, okay, it was being beat or the whole message of, how especially females in the spotlight have a hard time aging way more than men do. Yeah, we were beat over the head with that. But in that same vein, I thought it was a really just cool way to look at it because we have seen this story before, or message, I should say. We haven't seen the story, we've seen the message before. But I thought Demi Moore kind of the balance between Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley's characters was the essence of the entire movie. And I thought both actresses did a fantastic job playing the roles they were assigned, and especially when Demi Moore started to spin out into absolute madness, I thought she went places that I had no idea she was capable of going. And I actually thought Dennis Quaid deserved a supporting actor nom just for how disgusting he was. And again, like Demi Moore and he both played completely against type. And I always admire when actors take risks. You're chuckling, so I know you don't agree with me already, but I really loved him in this role. I thought he was spectacular.
Okay, yeah, this is definitely like Poor Things then, because for me, Dennis Quaid was like Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. Like, I just thought he was just over the top and ridiculous. And like, they were just, it wasn't really acting so much as just pantomiming. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Dennis Quaid in this.
And I had the exact same opinion about Mark Ruffalo last year. And yeah, he was ridiculous, but it's such a fun and against type way that it just entertained me endlessly, and I appreciate that. Yeah, he wasn't like, crying or emoting in any discernible way, but I really enjoyed his performance, and when something makes me feel something, then I tend to just put it higher on the list.
Fair enough. And you're absolutely right on the two lead actresses. They were great. They were uh yeah, the interaction between the two. I mean, they didn't interact very much, but you're right in terms of the way they took on the characteristics of each other. I thought was really good. And I will also say there's a lot of the criticism, it seemed, was harping on the body horror part and how people were like, oh, it's hard to watch. And apparently, in some of the first original premieres, some people were walking out and everything. That's ridiculous criticism. This, you mentioned David Cronenberg earlier. This was nothing compared to a Cronenberg movie in terms of body horror. So, yeah, that was, I don't think, is a fair criticism at all.
And I'm not a fan of the body horror genre just for
Yeah,
that
me neither.
reason. But so it was like I said earlier, it was a tribute to Kubrick and Cronenberg, but it was like Kubrick light and Cronenberg light.
Oh, yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah,
where they're like Kubrick always used white and red a whole lot, and like these very distorted depth perception perspectives and stuff like that, and that was prevalent throughout the entire film. And then yeah, just the monster thing at the end was, I thought it was more funny than disgusting.
yeah,
And
I agree. Yeah. Yeah,
and,
especially
and
when it goes up on stage and nobody seems to notice because it's wearing stupid masks.
yeah, yeah, there was some vast tonal shifts in that one that
Yeah.
didn't throw me off though, which is another thing that I admired about it. And
Well, again, for me, because I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be taking itself seriously, I wasn't sure where I was supposed to land on that. So it didn't throw me because, as I said, I kind of thought the whole thing was ridiculous. But
and I thought it stuck the landing. The final shot of Demi Moore's like face on the spider thing getting just swept up by the street sweeper on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I was like, that's a great way to just wrap up this whole message.
right, yeah, the book ended that. Obviously, the very first scene we see is the Hollywood sign being made for her character. So,
Yep.
all right. So my number four then is A Complete Unknown. And this, I think, was just, now we're getting into movies that I thought were very good. So for me, this was just a very good movie. Incredibly watchable, well made film filled with excellent performances by the whole cast. It was just very, very solid, which, in this year, kind of weak year puts it definitely into the top five for me. And it's number four. I thought, although it spanned a pretty long period of time, it didn't make the mistake that a lot of biopics make in trying to show us everything about the person's life. I thought it was a great decision to really focus on the struggle and the conversations about Dylan, about what kind of artist he actually was. I thought that was all a really good choice. Um, my big complaint and why I don't have it higher than this, I think I mentioned this before in a previous podcast, is that by the end of it, Dylan to me remains a total enigma. And in some ways, I think that was kind of the point. I mean, the choice of the title probably might suggest that, A Complete Unknown. But if so, I do think it's a bit of a cop out by the filmmakers. I've said this before, but filmmaking is about making choices. And so I kind of wanted them to take a position and say, okay, this is what we think drives Bob Dylan. And it just never did that. So I walked out of there not knowing anything more about Bob Dylan, the person, than I did when I went in there. And that for me is a bit of a failing for a biopic. So that's the only reason I don't have it higher. I thought overall it was a very good film.
That's the main point I was going to address with you, because you had a chance to speak about this briefly before as well, because you saw it before I did. But yeah, when I walked out, I was like, Martin does realize that this movie's called A Complete Unknown.
And I recognize from that
Yeah.
beginning, like I realize that's their choice. I just think it's a bit of a cop out for that to be because it isn't actually a choice.
And you had that same point about a different biopic that came out sometime in the past couple years. I don't remember which one it was, but you said you came out of it not knowing anything about the subject, but I whichever one it was escapes me, but that seems to
Okay.
be
Yeah.
seems to be a
Well,
common
yeah,
criticism.
then we're just fucking reading a Wikipedia page, right? Like, honestly, if you're not giving us insight into the person and who they are at the core, then why are we making these films?
Yeah, point taken. Did it span a long time though? I thought it was only like 4 or 5 years.
Well, that's a fair amount of time. Yeah, I guess. When does he first? Oh yeah, Newport was. Yeah, so you're right. It's about 5 6 years. Yeah.
Well, in terms of a biopic, that's not that long. It's not
No,
like
it isn't. But it's long enough that you're not just telling. Well, generally, you're not just telling like one little contained story. But they did do a good job of making it seem that way.
mm, yeah, I agree. Obviously, I have it higher, so I
Yeah.
have uh higher opinion of it than you did.
Okay.
But so we'll get to that then. What's
Okay.
your Oh wait, that was
So
okay,
yeah.
so number three. Number three. Number three for me is I'm Still Here.
Okay.
This is the one I've seen most recently,
Same with
and
me.
I was very, very impressed. Obviously, it's number three, but it's it's just like a family story, but with such wide-reaching themes and stuff that everybody can identify with. And I think I've only seen two completely Brazilian films, this and City of God, but I thought there were a lot of similarities between the two, especially in the way that the filmmaking was done, kind of a lot of handheld, um, very intimate between the characters, not a lot of like huge set pieces, although there were some here and there, and just brilliant performances, very good character development, and by 15 minutes in, I forgot I was reading subtitles.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I totally forgot as well, very, very early on. I have it higher, so I'll save most of my comments until I get to it. But I will say I gave it some grief before I saw the movie, but I was more talking about the distribution strategy than the movie itself. Like I
Mm.
think in previous podcasts, I said something like, "How the hell was
Oh,
this thing nominated? Like, who has seen this movie?" And I still think that's a legitimate claim, and it's actually a complaint I have about a few of these movies. That a few of the movies that were nominated for some big awards, like Sing Sing, for instance, that it's fucking very difficult to watch these movies. And so the distribution, if you're going to put yourself up for an Academy Award, make sure that people other than just the people in the Academy can see your film. So anyway, that was my complaint before, and that complaint still stands. But I agree, and obviously I have it higher. I thought it was a very good movie.
yeah, it's a very elitist approach to awards.
Yeah, and I don't like it.
Yeah. It's like if the general public can't see it until it's already been nominated, then you're kind of alienating a lot of your audience. And it's no wonder that the ratings of these award shows are in the shitter,
Yeah,
because who can, like, unless you're a hardcore film fan, like obviously we are, and you seek these movies out, they don't come to you. And
no,
so you have to really have your finger on the pulse, and the general public has, other shit to do. So,
exactly, exactly.
but I mean, if that's the criticism of this film, the marketing strategy, then I mean, they did a pretty good
Yeah,
job.
that's not, as I say, that's not a criticism of the film itself. That's just an overall criticism. I thought I'd mention it for this one in particular because for both of us, it was the last one we saw, and I think was the hardest to see. So yeah.
Yep.
All right. So my number three, we've already talked about it, was Dune Part Two. And now that we're into my top three, I did save a few thoughts, so I'll get into them. Um, I thought that a lot of the film, and this was just a masterclass in filmmaking. I mean, Denis Villeneuve is obviously one of our best filmmakers right now, but I thought a lot of the filming choices, like the decision to film the Harkonnen homeworld using infrared cameras,
Oh yeah.
like that could have gone disastrously wrong, especially because they could only do that once. Like I heard an interview with Villeneuve later, and he was talking about they didn't, have backup cameras. This was how they decided to film that. So if they got through all those days of filming, or even the dailies from the first couple of days, and they're like, "Oh, this looks terrible," they would have had to redo everything that they had already done. So, so it was a bold choice, and I thought almost all of the choices like that they made in this film really worked. Like I thought some of the special effects stuff was new and interesting in a way that we haven't really seen from sci-fi movies before. The way the fighting in some of those scenes happen with those guys kind of floating up onto the top of
Mm.
the rock. That's and it looked like it didn't look like special effects. It still looked kind of grounded in the world in a way. I thought all those filmmaking choices were fantastic. And then I've mentioned that I think they pulled out enough of the elements of the themes and the story of the book to still make it interesting and give you some things to think about in terms of themes about predestination and all this other kind of stuff. So for me, it was still one of the best movies of the year. So.
All right, yeah. So, number two. So you're gonna know who my number one is. So,
Yeah.
number two for me is Anora,
Okay.
which
Okay.
means a complete unknown is number one for me.
Yeah.
But so, yeah,
And, and you will also know mine because Anora for me is also number two.
okay.
So,
Yeah, I was blown away by Anora, especially since I didn't know anything about it going in. Really, I didn't even read the log line. I just saw it was nominated, so I was like, might as well watch it. And this is the only one of these films that I had that approach to. So I had zero expectations other than it's the first one out of my top five that I saw, and I was like, oh
yeah.
God, thank God, this Oscar well, no, no,
Finally, a good movie this year.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, there's still hope.
Yeah.
But it was such a great character piece and so well acted. And again, it made me feel feelings. And that was a rarity this year. So I was very impressed by the screenplay, the directing, and I just thought overall it was probably the most well done film of the year.
I thought yeah, I agree. It's number two for me as well. So I thought it was very good. I thought it's just a very interesting exploration of the nature of relationships and the extent to which, in a way, a lot of relationships are transactional, even though they aren't, like this one with money changing hands. It kind of explores the depressing question about whether or not people are in relationships for the same things, and or are they just expressions of what we all need in those moments that we get into the relationships. So I thought all those themes and everything were very interesting and very well explored. I really liked how everything in the movie proceeds very naturally from scene to scene, and all
Hmm.
the scenes the director let just flow and grow. Like he didn't, there's the famous thing about screenwriting. You get in late and you get out early in terms of
Hmm.
scenes. This didn't do that, so it kind of broke that rule. But I thought it worked because the scenes developed naturally, and the characters' reactions and actions in those I thought all made sense in each moment. And the characters themselves that way felt very believable and lived in, and they each had their own flaws. I really liked all of that aspect of it.
Yeah, you could really understand where every character was coming from at any given moment. Nothing felt forced or like this character has to make this decision to get from plot point A to plot point B.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like as you said, every scene flowed into the next one very seamlessly. And I think this is a good time to bring this point up. But how good was Tarantino's casting in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? And let me get to this. The
Okay.
Manson family consisted of Mikey Madsen,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
the
Yeah.
star of Honora, Margaret Qualley,
Qualley. Yeah.
star of The Substance, Sydney Sweeney, and Austin Butler.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's pretty damn good. Yeah.
yeah, that came out 10 years ago, and
Is that 10 years?
no,
No, couldn't
2018.
have been. Okay. I was
20,
gonna say
yeah,
couldn't have
yeah,
been.
yeah, 2018. So,
Damn,
but
time's not moving that quickly.
but for him to have that kind of instinct to, all of these people, with the exception of Sydney Sweeney, have been Oscar nominated, but Sydney Sweeney's obviously one of the top young stars.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I thought Mikey Madison was absolutely fantastic. Obviously carried the movie in what is a very complicated protagonist. Like you
definitely.
sympathize with her, but her actions and her motivations aren't ever entirely pure either. Like she obviously gets into the relationship for money to begin with, and then there's a bit of a transition on that. But I'm also not sure that she's ever really honest with herself about what
Hmm.
she wants, that character. And Mikey Madison just played that all with just such amazing kind of in an amazingly natural way, and just yeah, I just thought it was a fantastic performance.
Hmm.
I will say the my one quibble with the movie, it stalled for me a little bit in the middle when they spend a lot of time wandering around looking for Vanya. And I thought
Oh, okay, yeah.
those scenes did drag a bit. I mean, before I lauded the fact that he let scenes breathe, and some of the just okay, they look in this place and he's not there. They look in this place and he's not there. I thought it did drag a little bit in the middle, but overall, I agree that it was a really, really good movie.
And again, stuck the landing. The last
Absolutely
the last scene was so powerful.
incredible.
Yeah, it, it was one of those where I had to like sit there and contemplate it for 5-10 minutes, be like, wow, that was intense.
And only worked because they spent the time to build up characters other than the main character,
Yeah, yeah.
and for which yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I've forgotten the actor's name.
Igor, the guy who played
Igor
Igor.
Borisov. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's now gotten a nomination for best supporting actor, and but that kind of role could easily have just been just nothing,
yeah,
right? But this movie spent the time to develop that character into a very important role, and also a character that plays a big part in the realization of the main character at the end of the movie in that final scene.
yeah. There were no superfluous characters. Everybody had their own thing to do at all times. So yeah,
Yeah, even if some of them, fell by the wayside as the story went on, they fell by the wayside in a way that kind of made sense. Like, some of the heavies kind of got sidelined as the more important people had to come in and take over the operation.
yeah.
All right, so your number one then is
Yep.
obviously
A complete unknown.
yes.
And again, I mentioned this briefly a couple podcasts ago, but I cannot stand Bob Dylan as a person or an artist. So for this movie to make me feel the way it did was kind of a very, it was a huge testament to the filmmakers and Chalamet, and especially Edward Norton. He was an absolute revelation in this. I mean, he's one of the best actors of all time, in my opinion. He
Oh yeah, yeah. I've always loved Norton.
Every single time I see him, even if it's in a subpar movie, he is always the best actor in that movie, and he just nails it every time. He's so able to just crawl into a character's skin and lose himself completely. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's one of these actors that's like a notorious recluse. Like we know very
Mm.
little about his personal life, and those are kind of always the best actors because they don't their personal life isn't that interesting because they're so dedicated to their craft that their characters are more interesting than who they are in real life, which is totally fine.
Yeah,
You look at like the Daniel Day-Lewis's of the world and stuff like that.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. That's example number one right
yeah,
there.
But his monologue towards the end about the seesaw with the sand and the teaspoon and the shovel was just so captivating, and it was such a, like a corny little corny little story, parable is the word I'm looking for. So, but the way he delivers it, he's like
But it fit because his character
he's
was,
like the
I don't know that much about Pete Seeger, but the way he is portrayed in this movie, he is kind of a corny guy. Okay?
Yeah, like he's so wholesome
Yeah,
and like a Mr. Rogers type for
yeah.
like folk music. And I loved my favorite scene in the whole film was when he was on his public access TV show with the Black Blues player, and then the Bob Dylan comes in and they all just kind of start jamming together, and it's like he's the past playing on his banjo, the blues player is the present, and Dylan is the future, and they're all just kind of like they're brought together by this love of music, and that whole scene just gave me goosebumps.
I agree. And interestingly, that was one of the few completely fictional scenes in the movie. So obviously, as a movie, it did a good job of bringing things to us to explain a bit further the nature of the dynamic of the relationships between these guys.
Yeah, and like the point you brought up earlier, I'm glad it was kind of a contained story. It wasn't birth to death, which a lot of biopics kind of, well, Bob Dylan's still alive, so
It'd be hard to do. Yeah.
that's a lot of creative license. But I've always thought Bob Dylan was just a pretentious prick whose lyrics are all gibberish except for a couple of deep songs, and like everybody's like, "Oh man, you just don't get it, man." He's just so deep. Like, dude, no. Like and he and I can't stand the sound of his voice. It's just so it's so whiny. And I think Chalamet's singing as Bob Dylan is better than Bob Dylan himself. Because while he does a good impression of Dylan, he kind of brings the whininess down just a little bit. And I wound up listening to the A Complete Unknown soundtrack more than I ever have Dylan's actual recordings. So
Oh,
I have kind of a weird perspective coming into this movie. But towards
yeah.
the end, I was like, yeah, I didn't learn anything about Bob Dylan personally, but I don't really care.
Yeah, yeah. See, I do care. That's kind of what I want from a biopic. And I'm not the biggest Bob Dylan fan, but I definitely enjoy Bob Dylan. I've gone back, especially his earlier. I've listened to Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited. Those things a bunch of different times. Just as a over the last kind of 30 years as I've explored music, but I think. Chalamet was I thought Chalamet was good. I thought he was good enough. His singing actually was very impressive. It's very, very impressive that he was able to do the songs and do kind of like what's his name, Taron Egerton, when he did um,
Elton John.
Elton John in Rocket Man. I was kind of very impressed that he managed to sound like a young Elton John, and I was very impressed that Chalamet managed to do the singing. I thought his acting. I thought he was good. I thought he was good enough. I thought he was good. I thought in a weird way the acting in this movie was really carried by all the supporting characters. You mentioned Edward Norton. I thought Monica Barbaro, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, as Joan Baez was also fantastic. And just a number of the other supporting characters were really, really good.
I'm glad you brought up Rocket Man, the Elton John with Taron Egerton playing him, because this is another reason why I don't like Bob Dylan. Timothy Chalamet has never met Bob Dylan
Oh,
because
okay.
he is such a dick. But Elton John, on the other hand, invited Taron Egerton into his home to live with him for I think 2 months or something like that, so he could see how he lives.
Elton John was a producer on Rocket Man, so
Fair enough.
makes a bit of a difference.
Fair
No,
enough.
I take your point.
But like Elton John is like such a magnanimous person and just a good guy by
Yeah,
all accounts, like
that is true.
especially since he's gotten sober. But
Yeah.
it just goes to show that just because you're this lauded artist doesn't mean you have to be a prick.
Good point. But why is he such a prick then? Again, the movie, why I didn't have it slightly, or the movie didn't even bother, like, I don't know, give us something.
My theory is that he's just not that interesting of a person.
Okay.
And I think this is what the I think this is part of what the movie had to say actually because you know no matter what he was just attached to his guitar the entire like he would take a break to fuck or eat and then right after that he's back to his guitar. So everything that he has to say he's already said through his music.
Hmm.
That's why he almost never does interviews, never see him anywhere and except for on stage. And I think that he is just he, yeah, all his messages, he's not going to say anything interesting in interviews because he's already given it to you through his music. And I thought that's kind of the thread through that story.
I guess. I guess. All right. So my number one then, obviously, since it's the only one I haven't had yet, is I'm Still Here. And this kind of shocked me that this ended up as my number one movie, but I thought it was just a very, very good movie. It's not a perfect movie by all means. I thought there were some odd choices in terms of the time jump scenes they made near the end. I didn't think those all quite worked very well in terms of the flow of the story in the movie. Although one of them did give us probably the best conversation in that movie when two of the siblings were talking years later and they were asking each other, "So when did you first realize that dad wasn't coming back?" That scene, wow,
Yeah, that was
that one got me
mhm.
emotionally. That one just really dug in. But overall, I just thought it was an incredibly well made movie about kind of the Kafkaesque nature of justice in any society in which the rule of law is disintegrated and people are given unchecked power. And I just thought like it dealt with those really big themes by telling a very personal and emotional family story. And so if you can knock those two things off in one movie, and I think it did, that for me is a very, very well done movie.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And like I said, it's just a family story, but with so many wide-reaching themes. And uh, I didn't know. Okay, I'll just admit I didn't know anything about the dictatorship in Brazil in the early 70s. So I was brought into this world kind of ignorant and blind, but at the same time, you knew what was going on right away without like a whole bunch of exposition.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like I get the concept of a military dictatorship. I don't need like a whole there were a few lines beforehand just letting you know where we are and kind of what's going on, but this like it wasn't like a whole bunch of newsreels like bulletin Brazil 1970 blah blah blah. Somebody takes over and like, I don't even think they mentioned the dictator's name throughout the entire thing. Like you saw him on pictures and posters, but uh
right. Well, I think I mean, not to get too historical about it, but I think in that case there was a dictator, but it was also like a military junta, like it was a bunch of different military guys,
mm.
and sort of at any given time, one of them was more ascendant, and then another guy would rise up, but it was all within the same sort of cadre of military officers.
Yeah, but see, we didn't need to know that to get the crux of the story.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, what I just said wouldn't have made for a very interesting exposition in the movie. So
No.
I'm glad they left that out. Yeah.
And to find an entire family to find that many actors, especially the kids, that could just meld and make you think you're watching like a home movie because like I said before, a lot of it's like handheld and
Yeah.
it just seems like you're watching home video of this family. And while a lot of the stuff may seem mundane, just like talking about souffle and stuff like that, it all melds into this melting pot of these characters who each have their own arc, even though there's what, eight people in this family, and it's not a particularly long movie. I think it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, but everybody has their own story, everybody has their own personality, nobody's kind of swept under the rug, and the performances by everybody, top to bottom, were just chef's kiss.
That's a very good point about the individuals in the family. Yeah, like when I first started watching the movie, and then you get introduced to another, and then another kid,
Mhm.
and I'm like, how many kids are in this damn family? How am I going to keep track of them all? It wasn't hard at all.
Mm.
Within 15 minutes, I could differentiate between all of the members of the family. I knew each of them had their own distinct personalities and stood out in different ways. And you kind of knew all that was just very, very well done. And as you said, without giving us just a lot of crazy exposition, it just all happened within the flow of the story. Just incredible stuff.
Yeah, and again, not a whole lot of set pieces.
Nope.
It wasn't like a big movie, but like the prison scenes were very well done because they weren't expansive, and in that way it really worked because it felt more claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And the dad, again, we're pretty late to this podcast, but spoiler alert, the dad disappears, what, maybe a half hour in, but he looms so large over this whole family. And again, he was a terrific actor. He's so warm and welcoming, and so such a just a great dad, while at the same time being this kind of freedom fighter behind the scenes, kind of not like boots on the ground, but passing parcels around and kind of keeping this underground network going. And just as soon as he leaves, you feel a hole, not just in the family, but in the hearts of each character as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And what that whole does to everybody else as
Yeah,
as time wears on, how that just increasingly rips apart the fabric of what they had built. And we're left to extrapolate that that same thing was happening to the entire society.
exactly. And just you just see how even when we do flash forward to all the way from the 70s to the 90s, that never goes away.
No,
It affects the not the kids, but the grandkids, and just not just the people it immediately affects, but generations on. And it's just very, very powerful.
as those things do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, surprise to me, as but that ended up being my number one in our power rankings.
Yeah, the last one you see winds up number one. I mean, that's not being prisoner of the moment. I completely agree with all your
Don't
points.
think it was. Yeah, I don't think it is. I was worried about that. I'm like, am I just because this is the most recent one I've seen? But no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I would not have a problem putting that at number one myself either. And like I said, last year I was like, yeah, this is definitely my number one. Bang, 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 bang,
Yeah,
all the way down. But these, well, the bottom, yeah, it's like the bottom five and the top four for me are all kind of
yeah, I agree.
interchangeable
Yeah,
to
yeah.
some extent.
Brutalist is definitely number five, and then
Yeah.
my top four, and then my bottom five are yeah. All right, should we? We're running pretty long here. Should we
Yeah.
just rhyme off our lists again, just to close this out? So you go first.
All right. So at 10, I have Nickel Boys. 9, Emilia Pérez. 8, Conclave. 7, Dune Part 2. 6, Wicked. 5, The Brutalist. 4, The Substance. 3, I'm Still Here. 2, Anora. And 1, A Complete Unknown.
All right, and I had 10 Emilia Perez, 9 The Substance, 8 Nickel Boys, 7 Wicked, 6 Conclave, 5 The Brutalist, 4 A Complete Unknown, 3 Dune Part 2, 2 Anora, and 1 I'm Still Here.
Yeah, so the only real disparities were Dune and The Substance.
Yes, yeah, which we almost had flipped. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, yeah, so like and subscribe. Again, Oscars are March 2nd, and stay tuned because pretty soon we're going to be dropping our full Oscar predictions for all the major categories and some of the minor ones. So, I already said like and subscribe, but do it again because we need more subscribers.
Make sure
And
you do. Yeah,
leave us a comment if you agree or disagree, especially if you disagree, because I like to shake it up a bit.
mix it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so as always, I'm Zach Miller.
And I'm Martin Cooke.
And we'll see you next time on the Unsolicited Film Reviews podcast.